Here we go. Lesson 5, the Noahic covenant, or the covenant with Noah. So in the Bible, there are 7 or 8 major covenants. I say 7 or 8 because different theologians and scholars classify them differently. But the first two, the Edenic and the Adamic covenant, or the covenant in Eden and the covenant with Adam, some will classify that as one covenant with 2 parts. Others will make it distinct. The one before the fall is the Edenic covenant. The one after the fall is the Adamic covenant. Then what we're going to be looking at today is the Noahic covenant, or the covenant with Noah. And in many ways, it's very similar to the very first covenant, and we're going to acknowledge that. Number 4, there's the Abrahamic covenant, where God grants the land to Abraham, and he promises that his seed will sit on the throne forever. And of course, there's the familiar Mosaic covenant that comes with the 10 Commandments and the law and the priesthood, indicated in Exodus and Deuteronomy. There's the Davidic covenant, and this is really the expression of the promised seed to Abraham, that David will sit on the throne, his line will not end, and his seed will be on the throne permanently. There's the Palestinian covenant, which is sort of the focus on the land promise to Abraham. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 30. And then finally, the new covenant. So all of those are agreements between God and man. Some of them are conditional, some of them are unconditional, and we're focusing on the Noahic covenant today. So at this point in studying Noah and his family have gone into the ark. They have survived the storm. They have sheltered in the ark. They have come out of the ark. They've emerged into this new creation, and everything is starting over. And that's kind of where we're going to pick up today. So we are in Genesis chapter 9, and I need a reader for verses 1 through 4. Genesis 9, verses 1 through 4. Larry?
And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And the hand of man, and the hand of require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you be ye fruitful and multiply, and bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein.
Shirley, there was a warning for you there. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Oh man, you better pay attention. So Noah and his family have emerged from the ark, and last week we talked about what does it look like when they take the roof off, what does it look like when he releases the dove and the dove brings back the olive leaf. But the earth is fresh from the flood, and I want us to compare the earth after Noah to the earth at creation in Genesis chapter 1. How are these two settings similar? The earth as Noah and his family come off the ark, and the earth as described in Genesis chapter 1 at original creation. How are they similar? Everything's new and fresh?
They're new and fresh and untouched by man.
And clean?
Untouched by man so far.
Really muddy.
Muddy? Really muddy, right? Absolutely. And the interesting thing, in Genesis 1:2, we read about the Spirit of God hovering over the surface of the deep. And then as we go through the days of creation, God gathers the seas and he makes the dry land appear, and he causes vegetation to grow on that dry land. So the earth had a watery beginning, and here Noah is coming out from this watery flood. And even the sign of the olive leaf being plucked, the vegetation has begun to grow again on the land. Noah sends out the birds. All of the land animals and Noah and his family come out onto the earth. Just like in creation, God creates the birds and the fish and the land animals and man. So it's a new beginning. It's a starting over. And we looked at the theme of renewal and recreation last week. Once Noah and his family emerged from the ark, God does something very special in verse 1. What does God do in chapter 9, verse 1? He blessed them, right? We're going to see a pattern with this Noahic covenant that is similar to that from Eden. God blesses them, and he commands Noah and his family to do what? Multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. So he blesses them. He tells them to be fruitful and multiply and to replenish the earth. God tells Adam and Eve also to replenish the earth. Isn't that interesting? He doesn't tell them populate the earth originally. He says replenish the earth. Genesis 1:28 to Adam and Eve, God blessed them. This is before the fall. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So look at the pattern between this covenant with Noah and the covenant in Eden. God blesses them. God tells them to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Remember, God gave Adam and Eve dominion over everything. And what did God tell Noah? But the dread of you shall fall upon every living creature on the earth. He's giving them dominion over the animals once again, just like he did Adam and Eve. And then there is one prohibition. There is a diet restriction. What has changed for Noah and his family after the flood versus before the flood regarding their diets?
They can eat meat.
They can eat meat, right? They can eat,
It still has the lifeblood in it.
but not the blood. Exactly. There is a prohibition in this new world. In this new world, God says that they can now eat meat. God told Adam and Eve that every herb-bearing seed, all of the fruit-bearing trees were to be food for Adam and Eve and also for all the animal life. So before the flood, everyone was vegan or vegetarian, right? Even all of nature. Can you imagine a lion eating grain, right? So all of the animal life, mankind, they were sustained by the plants, but something has changed after the flood. God says, now you can eat meat. You can eat the creatures except for one thing, you cannot eat the lifeblood. Why do you suppose their diet changed?
Because it's a new world. And maybe all the plant life was dead.
There you go.
Maybe so. Maybe it was a practical thing,
Well,
right?
And they
Maybe
have
there
to
wasn't
wait
any
for the
fruits
crops to
around.
grow.
They had to wait for the crops.
Season to grow it.
Yeah.
Besides all that, they have to have some kind of animal control.
Animal control.
Right.
Population control.
Population control? Yeah, maybe so. Maybe the food chain's introduced to keep everything in balance. Absolutely.
You would think that'd be kind of weird for all of them animals to be vegan on the boat and then come off and be like, I ain't eating them.
Yeah.
Well, when Adam and Eve were Adam told God, the lion ate the other monkey. You know, didn't he say something like that?
The lion ate the monkey? I don't know where that is. I don't know where that is. So what I want you to see here is God changed their diet, but he did preserve the blood. He said you can eat all of the creatures, but you may not eat of the blood. So there is this restriction in their diet. If we go back to Adam and Eve, God gave them all of the plants, all of the fruit-bearing trees to eat, but he said you can't eat one thing. What was it? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So they both have this restriction in their diet. What's interesting, if you go to the Mosaic covenant, further restrictions are given to Israel, clean animals versus unclean animals, and specifically what parts of the animal that they could eat if it was given for sacrifice. So that's always there. But God preserves the blood. Leviticus 17:11 says, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. So he is showing Noah that the blood is sacred. And we know that it is the blood that Christ shed on the cross that creates our atonement. Also, the government is a little bit different. Larry already read this part. But in verses 5 and 6, God gives a certain authority to Noah and his family. What new authority did God bestow upon man? An accounting for the life of another human being. Very well said. So he says, if blood is shed, then the result is capital punishment, right? This is new. So before the flood, we know that men were violent upon the earth. They we've talked about the giants, we've talked about their rebellious attitudes, and we can possibly expect that was unchecked, right? There wasn't a government, there wasn't a police state or anything like that. It was unchecked. So after the flood, God is giving Noah the authority to form a government. If someone murders another person, then they will have their blood shed as well. And then further detail about that is given in the book of Leviticus about cities of refuge and what would happen if someone is accidentally killed and so on and so forth. So things are changing, things are different here in the New World. But let's read about the details of the covenant. A covenant is an agreement, a legal agreement between two parties. Sometimes it can be conditional, sometimes it can be unconditional. And there's examples of both in all of the covenants of the Bible. But let's look at the details of the Noahic covenant. This is still chapter 9. I need a reader, verses 8 through 17. 8 through 17. Who's ready to go?
God spoke to Noah and to his sons, saying, Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. And I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and every living creature, me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud.
Through 17.
And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth.
All right, so let's look at the details of the covenant, and then we'll look at the significance of the rainbow. So first of all, who were the parties involved in this covenant? Between what parties was this established?
God and Noah and all of his descendants.
God and Noah and all of his descendants. And all of the animals, all living flesh on the earth, right? So it's between God and Noah and his seed or his descendants. That includes us. We're all descended from Noah. And all the creatures living on the earth. What is the promise of the covenant?
Never to flood the earth again.
Never.
Destroy it by flood.
Right. Never to destroy the earth by flood again.
And they make you wonder if he's not going to actually do it.
That's right. Right. And the promise is when you see the cloud and you see the rain, I will set my rainbow in the cloud. So you can know, you can remember, I'm not going to destroy all flesh by the flood. But like you said, it can get pretty scary sometimes. He may destroy a village or a neighborhood with a flood, but he will not wipe out all flesh by means of the flood. And what was the sign or the token of the covenant? The rainbow. And this is something brand new. This is a new revelation of God to man because previously they had not seen the rainbow. Do we know what? They didn't see clouds either, right? It was all new. So do we know how the rainbow's formed?
That's on your little picture right here. By the refraction,
Mm-hmm.
dispersion, and reflection of light.
Very good. We know it.
That's a prism.
Exactly. It's a prism. Shall we talk about Snell's law and the angle of incidence and the angle of refraction and the dispersion of light? We could. Bust out the formula. Yeah.
Do we get credit for that?
No. No. This is a continuing education class. No academic credit. So this is something new because previously what causes the rainbow is the droplets in the sky acting like a prism, right? And when white light hits the droplets, like hitting a new medium, the different wavelengths of light travel at different speeds through the water, and so the light is separated into the different spectrum or the different spectra, and then it's reflected out of the droplet, and we see the rainbow. So because previously it had not rained, the earth had not been flooded, this was a new phenomenon that they were seeing, as evidenced by the raindrops that were in the sky. How long is this covenant to last? Forever. It is an everlasting covenant, right? And the rainbow is the sign of the covenant. So this was new to Noah and his family. They had never seen the rainbow before because it had never rained like this before, and it was a new revelation of God. This is the sign of the covenant. This is the token of the covenant, and we still see it every single time that it rains. Well, not every single time, but when the sun is right. So the Hebrew word translated as rainbow in Genesis 9:13, which, by the way, Genesis 9:13, look at this lovely painting that Willow did yesterday. It says, Genesis 9:13, I have set my rainbow in the clouds as a token of the covenant between me and the earth. Isn't that lovely? She's my artist.
And perfect for our lesson today.
I know.
Yes.
I know it. It's awesome.
She did that.
Yeah, she.
Double rainbows?
Yeah, it just seems to me, I see more and more of them where they used to be real odd, and now they're seem to be fairly common.
Wonder why.
That's my question.
I think God's trying to guide us.
That's trying to tell us.
It's a good question. We could.
You see a lot of double rainbows now.
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't hear it.
I couldn't.
I couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
That's interesting.
I've actually seen a true.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think God's proving his power that he is the giver of the rainbow.
Mhm.
It should not be
Yes.
distorted.
Right.
Right.
It is his token and his sign.
I've seen a rainbow.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Like with color?
It was not very bright colors, very muted,
Mhm.
but there was clouds behind us and clouds in front of us, and the moon came out.
How cool.
It was eerie looking, but
That's awesome. You know, I was thinking about in the Bible, God is light, and he covers himself in order to protect us. And there are certain rays that are very dangerous to DNA, dangerous to the human body. And there's only a small window of light, or a range of spectra that we can see visibly. But there's infrared, there's microwave, there's gamma rays, there's ultraviolet, things that cannot be seen by the human eye. So when we see the rainbow, we're only seeing the visible part of the spectrum. So thinking about the double and triple rainbows, is it possible that when we are resurrected in our glorified bodies that we'll be able to observe the other spectra, the very small wavelengths and the very large wavelengths, and observe different colors? And I've heard people talk about being able to observe different colors or seeing different colors and visions of heaven that they can't describe. Is it because all that we can see is a small or a small range in the spectrum with our physical eyes, but we know that there's infrared, we know that there's ultraviolet, we just can't see it. But if we could see it, what would it look like? What would the colors be?
Don't you think
Right?
Mr. Crayola freaked out when he died and got to heaven?
Mr.
Oh, that's right. He only had like 144. Yeah, that's right.
I want to go back. I need to make some more colors.
I need a bigger box.
You made quite a few.
So the Hebrew word translated as rainbow in Genesis 9:13 is kasheth. This word is used 76 times in the Old Testament and usually refers to the bow of an archer. So it's only translated as rainbow here in Genesis 9. Other times, it's the bow as in bow and arrow, as in a weapon that an archer would use. But if you think about the shape of the rainbow after a storm, it does resemble the shape of a bow, right? As a bow and arrow. But it is not pointed towards the earth. It is pointed away from the earth, right? So when one looks upon the rainbow, the arrow is not pointed at the earth. When God looks upon the rainbow, he sees his covenant and he remembers he will not destroy all flesh with the flood any longer. So looking at the rainbow and as it appears through the Bible, it's very interesting how it is associated with Jesus. So let's look at the characters in the Bible who are connected to the rainbow. Genesis 37:3, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he gave him a what? A coat of many colors. So Joseph is enrobed in a rainbow coat. And we know that Joseph is a very clear type of Christ. And we've studied Joseph and how he's a foreshadow of Christ. And we could look at all the details of Joseph's life. That he was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold for silver. He was put in the cistern where there was no water, just like Jesus was put in an empty tomb. We know that Joseph was falsely accused. He was imprisoned with two criminals, right? And one he pronounces restoration, the other one he pronounces condemnation, just like Jesus was crucified between two thieves. The good thief who put his faith in Jesus and was saved, and the other one implied he was not saved. We know that it was Pharaoh that exalted Joseph from prison to the highest place in the land, and because of his wisdom, Joseph stored up grain. He saved multitudes from Egypt, and he also eventually saved his brethren, or the nation of Israel. And this is clearly a picture of Jesus, right? Jesus was betrayed, he was sold, he was crucified, he was put in the empty tomb, he was exalted from death, he was taken out of that tomb by God and placed at the right hand of gathering grain. He has been saving multitudes and multitudes of Gentiles, and ultimately he will save his brethren, the nation of Israel. So Joseph is a very clear foreshadow of Christ. And why is it that his father gave him a coat of many colors? Because it's a picture of the glory of God around Jesus, as we'll see. Tamar, daughter of David, daughter of the king, had a garment of diverse colors upon her. So that's very interesting. The daughter of the king with a beautiful coat. And we can compare that to the New Jerusalem being clothed with all kinds of jewels and a rainbow array of stones. In Revelation chapter 4, verses 2 and 3, Don?
Another point along that line, who was it Dolly Parton?
Mm-hmm.
Who sang the song of the coat of many colors, because they were very poor, and her mother gathered strips of cloth to make a coat for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was very proud of her coat, but all the other children teased her because she was too poor to have a better coat. And she said, "No, this is what I want."
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's cool. That's cool. She was proud of her coat of many colors. So think of Joseph in his rainbow coat and jump ahead to Revelation chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. John is having a vision of the heavenly temple. He sees the very throne of God, and he says, "And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald." So when John sees the heavenly throne, he's really amazed by the glory around the throne. He describes it as a rainbow like an emerald. And it's very interesting. He's describing the one on the throne like a jasper and a sardine stone. And if we go back to the breastplate of the high priest, the sardine stone was the first stone on the breastplate of the high priest. The jasper stone was the very last stone on the breastplate of the high priest. And we know that Jesus says, "I am the first and the last," right? And we also know that he is the fulfillment. He is the true high priest that is in heaven. So the one on the throne has all of these precious jewels. And it also says the rainbow shone like an emerald. Emerald was on the breastplate of the high priest. That was in the place of Judah. And we know Jesus was the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So looking at the throne, John...
Emerald mean? I remember you saying, like, the jasper meant the holiness of Jesus, the red is the redemption, the round rainbow was eternity, but I don't remember what emerald was.
You know what? I don't think that was me. I haven't learned that. The only thing I know about, like, the jasper and sardine, first and last, and then the emerald was the fourth one on it was row 2, column 1, if you're thinking about a matrix. That emerald was in the place of the tribe of Judah, and Jesus was the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But I don't know the answer to your question. But I'm interested in...
Homework on that and report to us.
Yes, because that sounds really interesting.
When we
Go back
did
and-
it.
Really?
I don't remember that.
I don't either, but go back and find
Maybe
it.
we did, and I just can't remember. So, because we cover so many details in this class.
Well, you gotta see.
Oh no, I don't make C's. What are you talking about?
No.
Relate again to something that you've seen around here. I have a great nephew whose name is Jasper.
hmm
When I first thought that, I thought that's an ancient name. Where did that came from? And then he explained there's a Jasper stone.
hmm
He's got red hair, and his mother always wants to take him to places where a lot of people have red hair,
hmm
so he can feel it all.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it is.
You know what? That makes me think of Horace and Jasper on the 101 Dalmatians. Oh. So the point is, around the throne in heaven, there is this brilliance which is described as a rainbow. Now, a scripture that I do not have on your notes, which if you take notes you should really write down, Ezekiel 1:28. Ezekiel also has a vision of the heavenly temple and the glory of the throne. And this is what it says in Ezekiel 1:28. It says, "As the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain, so was the appearance round about." This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. So the rainbow is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And we see it around the throne in the book of Revelation, and this is the token that God gives to Noah as a promise that he will not destroy all flesh by a flood anymore. It is the appearance of the glory of the Lord. Then we see it again in Revelation 10:1. Remember, the rainbow angel is what we like to call it in Revelation 10. "I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire." So this angel is surrounded by the glory of God. Then if we look at the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21, the New Jerusalem, the city coming down out of heaven, is described as having these 12 foundations, and each foundation is a precious stone or a precious jewel, and they're listed there in the book of Revelation. So think about whenever light hits these precious jewels and it reflects all of these different colors, it's reflecting the glory of God. So just like we see Tamar, the daughter of the king, with her special coat given to her by her father because she was the daughter of the king, we see the New Jerusalem, the bride of Christ, reflecting the glory of God in all of these colors. So the rainbow is very special. It is very sacred. It is a token or a sign that God gave to Noah as a confirmation of the promise that they were safe. God would look upon this sign, look upon the rainbow, and he would no longer destroy any flesh. And as Shirley alluded to a moment ago, as Christians, we understand that the rainbow was given to us by God, that it is a picture of the glory of God, according to Ezekiel. But a person growing up today without knowledge of the Bible might see the rainbow as representing something else, right? How does the world use the rainbow?
The gays.
Right.
It's all are welcomed and represent the gay population.
Yeah, the LGBTQ movement, right? Which is a perversion of what God intended in the garden. God intended man and woman to be married and to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So the world takes that rainbow and uses it as a symbol, and of course it is Satan mimicking God's glory for his own purposes, which is a complete distortion of the Word of God. So it's very heartbreaking for a Christian to see how this precious symbol, this gift given to us by God as a promise of His mercy, is used in that way. But let's talk about the rainbow as a sign. So last page. Genesis 9:12 says that the rainbow will be the sign of the covenant. The Hebrew word for sign is oath. Okay, we're going to read it right to left. The letters are aleph, vav, and tav. Okay, so when we see oath, That's how we would pronounce it in Hebrew. It can be translated sign, token, miracle, wonder, or banner. This word is used 79 times in the Old Testament, and I want you to look at where this word for sign or token is used and how it's connected to Jesus. First of all, it's used in Genesis 1:14 as the purpose of the sun, moon, and stars. Remember, it says the sun, moon, and stars are to be created for signs, seasons, days, and years, right? That's oath and moed, signs and feasts. This word is used to describe the mark upon Cain, the sign of circumcision, that's the sign of the Abrahamic covenant. This word oath is used to describe the miraculous signs that Moses would show Pharaoh. And here's a really important one. This word oath is used to describe the blood of the lamb on the doorposts. Remember in Egypt, God says, sacrifice the Passover lamb. Use the hyssop branch to put the blood on the doorpost. The blood on the doorpost was an oath or a sign or a token, right? The banners above each of the 12 tribes of Israel are described as signs or tokens or oath. And in Isaiah 7:14, the sign of a virgin conceiving and giving birth to the son, which would be called Emmanuel. So this sign oath is used for the blood of the Passover lamb. It is used as a token that God promised as a sign of the birth of Messiah, the virgin conceiving and giving birth to the son. So if we look closely at the word, and remember, Hebrews read right to left, what's the first letter? X, N, no, it is what? The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Do you recognize it? Aleph, right? So the letter on the right is the aleph. That's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and we've studied that letter as representing the sovereignty of God, right? Now, go to the left side. That would be the last letter in the word. That's the 22nd letter, or the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. What's that one? Tav. Very good. So the first letter is aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The last letter is tav, the 22nd or last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So in this word for sign, we've got the first letter and the last letter, right? Anybody know the letter in the middle? It's number 6. Vav. Good job. Good job. And Vav, the 6th letter, we've looked at representing a nail or a hook. Remember the hooks in the veil in the tabernacle? So we've got the first and the last, and we have the picture of the nail in the middle. This is the sign, the token, the word for token, used to describe the rainbow. And when God looks upon the rainbow, he will remember his covenant. When he looks upon the tav with the nail in between, he will remember his covenant. So let me remind you, this was quite a while ago, but we studied the aleph and the tav together, right? The word we're looking at here is oath. It's got 3 letters, aleph, vav, and tav. That's the word for oath. But if that vav in the middle is missing and you just have the aleph, it's a special Hebrew word that has a grammatical function. So when the aleph and tav are used together without the vav in the middle, remember it represents the direct object in Hebrew grammar, but it's not translated into English. So a couple of places where we can see how the aleph and tav is used. Genesis 22:13. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his aleph tav, the ram, right? So if I were reading that in Hebrew, I would see the aleph tav before the word for ram, and the aleph tav is a picture of the first and the last. Grammatically in Hebrew, it's just a direct object that's placed into the sentence, again, not translated into English, but we know the ram with his horns caught in the thicket is a picture of Jesus, and there it's identified with the aleph and tav. Isaiah 53:6, all we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on aleph tav the iniquity of us all. We know that it was upon Jesus that God put all of the iniquity, and there you have in the Hebrew sentence the aleph tav as the direct object. The direct object receives all of the action, right? And then him is Jesus. Zechariah 12:10, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications, and they shall look upon aleph tav, me whom they have pierced. The one that was pierced was Jesus, and there it's preceded by the aleph tav, the direct object. So, what is the point of all of this? Well, if we go to the book of Revelation in a couple of places, Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Alpha and Omega, of course, are the first Greek letter and the last Greek letter. But if we were to say that in Hebrew, we would say, I am the aleph and the tav. If we were to say that in English, I'm the A and the Z, right? He's saying I'm the beginning and the end, I'm the first and the last. He is the author and the perfecter of our faith. So those two letters together are also involved in this word for sign or oath, aleph, vav, tav. The interesting thing about the aleph tav, we know Jesus is the ultimate high priest. And we know the high priest of Israel would wear the breastplate, and within the breastplate he would carry the Urim and Thummim, right? Urim starts with aleph, Thummim starts with tav. The aleph and tav, the first and the last. So if we consider the aleph and tav representing the first and the last, and in this word for oath we see the vav or the nail in the middle, that is a sign. That is a token of the covenant. So back to oath. When the Lord looks upon the rainbow, the sign or the token of the covenant, he will remember his promise not to destroy the flesh that lives upon the earth by a flood. In the same way, look at Exodus 12:23 about the Passover blood. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and the two side posts, when he sees the token of the blood of the lamb, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your house to smite you. So when the Lord looks at the rainbow, he remembers his promise to preserve the earth. When the Lord looks upon the blood on the doorposts, he does not allow the destroyer to go in and kill the firstborn. In the same way, when the Lord sees us in Christ, he sees the token of Jesus Christ. He sees the oath, the aleph and the tav and the nail, right? Romans 1 says, there is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh but after the Spirit. When we are in Christ, God looks upon us and he sees the sign of his covenant. He sees the blood of Christ. Colossians 3:3 says, for ye are dead and your life is hid with Christ in God. So Christ on the throne, surrounded by the glory of the rainbow, that is the ultimate sign of the covenant between God and man, right? The glory of God as represented in the rainbow is ultimately the glory of God around the throne, and the one on the throne is Jesus. And when we are in him, God looks upon the token of his covenant and we are spared, we are saved. So the rainbow again is a foreshadow of Christ. Good stuff. Think about that when you see the rainbow after the storm. Question?
When I see rainbow, I think about the promise. The promise is a key word.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is the promise of the new covenant.
Yes.
He's coming back. He does not break his promise.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see the rainbow, that just assures you that it helps you remember he does not break his promise.
Right. Right.
But I think of it as safe.
Safe. Norm, what were you going to
It
say?
is glorious, to say the least.
It is glorious.
Last week I found a bunch of books, and in the books were 4 annuals from Vernon High School from the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through them, and they were interesting. And towards the back, they had jokes involving the seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently one of the girls in the class had red hair. And someone said, "How'd you get that red hair?" And she said, "Well, when I was little, I had scarlet fever."
Oh, that was weird.
Tell that to Jasper, Dawn.
Doesn't apply.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, thank you for listening.